It's no voice watch again. We're continuing on regardless. And let's start looking towards what Illinois brings to the table, because this is going to be a tough game for Michigan against the number 21 team in the country, according to the coaches poll. I think also the AP, but I'm going off the coaches poll. And certainly there's some things, but this isn't necessarily the most daunting game in the world. And again, neither was Washington. But let's talk about what Michigan will be facing, as well as one thing I want to see Michigan do in particular against Illinois on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. We're back and doing it. I'm going to pop a cough drop. I feel more comfortable doing that than on the Bleacher Report thing I did. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire, 3USA Today Sports Media Group. Yet another sick day, unfortunately. So bear with me as my voice I might have to take some breaks here and there. But feel like we're getting slightly stronger as the days go by. And with that, we're starting to look ahead to Illinois. Now, this is a big game for Michigan, and that's something that I don't think we were necessarily saying in the preseason. But you can tell how much it means to Illinois by the fact that Brett Bielema, who I love Bert. I love him. But he's getting choked up. We're talking about Michigan this week. It's the 100th anniversary rededication game, Red Grange and all of that. His comeback, him basically putting the Illini team on his shoulders to help beat Michigan in 1924, October 18th. So they're playing it a day afterwards. But it is a big game for Michigan also, just because this is the second half of the season and you have no really any gimmies, right? Is this going to be a 7-5 season? Is it going to be a 6-6 season? Is it going to be an 8-4 season? Is it going to be a 10-2 season? It can be. I wouldn't bet on it, but it can be. And the way that you kind of get there is just by virtue of taking your opponent seriously, preparing accurately, and executing. And executing to your fullest extent. We'll get to some of the execution stuff in segment 3, but I want to look at what Illinois does well. Let's start with their defense. This is not the same Illinois defense that caused problems for Michigan in 2022. You have to remember that game. I'm pretty sure it was like 10 degrees out. I remember I bought my super coat before it in preparation for that game. I remember the night before walking Zuri in what was like negative temperatures and everything. I'm pretty sure that's what that game was. I don't remember 100% the game. It kind of feels like it just lost in my memory. Outside of the opening when Blake ran all over him. But remember, they had the number one defense, I believe, at the time. They had the number one rushing defense at the time. They were kind of known for their inability to give up much. I've got their defensive numbers up here. So before the Michigan game in 2022, they had given up some rushing yards here and there. They gave up 142 to Purdue. They gave up 112 to Michigan State, 146 to Minnesota. And it wasn't until that they gave up the second most. They gave 182 to Wyoming, but 168 to Michigan. They were really good against the pass. They had multiple games where they hadn't given up much in terms of they really kind of were a team that was going to make you one-dimensional one way or the other. So far, look at Wyoming. They rushed 182 yards, but they only passed for 30. Look at Indiana the next week. They passed for 330 yards, but only rushed for 32. That's kind of what the defense did every single week. There was no one that was like particularly balanced until really kind of the 3 games that they started to lose there. Michigan State, Purdue, and Michigan was when they kind of started to see some more balanced offensive attacks. But this year, it's not quite that. And you can kind of see that here. So looking at what they have done, like they played Eastern Illinois, they allowed 147 passing yards and 49 rushing yards. But then every other team except for Nebraska has been mostly very balanced. And I mean, they've won all their games except for against Penn State, but pretty much every team has been kind of balanced. So Kansas had lost by a possession. They lost 23-17, but they had 178 rushing yards, 141 passing yards. You look at Nebraska, that was a one possession game as well. That one went to overtime. Nebraska had 297 passing yards, but only 48 rushing yards. And so you hear some of those numbers, and obviously Kansas's rushing yards makes you feel a little bit better. They've had a couple games where they've kept two teams to under 100 rushing yards, but then the last two games each, they've allowed 239 rushing yards against both Penn State and Purdue. So they have their moments where they give up a lot. So Michigan's got to stay disciplined when it comes to that. Purdue's kind of surprising because they've been offensively anemic. They have a new quarterback, less experience, and they put up 536 yards against Illinois. That's not the type of thing, like 536 yards. No one came close to that in 2022 when they took Michigan to the brink. You have to look at last year, and they only had one game, which was against a ranked Kansas team that burst onto the scene, to see those types of yards. Even in 2021, only one team had that. Now, Michigan's anemic offensively, so it's kind of hard to say that Michigan's going to take advantage, but they have given up a lot of rushing yards. With that in mind, they've got the number 77 rush defense. They allow an average 149 yards per game. So, again, remember that they were highly ranked when it came to that. So, there's that. Scoring defense there. I mean, their defensive numbers are okay. They're not like anything eye-popping. Scoring defense, it is. 32 in the country, 20 points per game given up. That's a little bit better than Michigan, who is allowing 22 points per game. Their pass defense is 44 in the country. They allow 197. So Michigan, find a way to get 197. That's what they give up. Okay. Hopefully we're getting that out of the system. I don't think we do. Okay. Now we're out of the system, I think. So that's kind of the thing, is like, this is the defense you're going up against. They should allow you the rushing yards that you're hoping. Obviously, they're going to try to sell out to stop the run. So Jack Tuttle's going to need to take advantage and back him off. If you can do that, then you're going to have, especially with the backs that Michigan has, you're going to bust some long ones. That's the good news. They need to figure that out. Michigan does. So, all right, we're going to move on to what Illinois has done offensively, where they rank, what they've accumulated against other teams, and all of that stuff. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, listen, there's a lot of events that you're going to want to get to, whether it's basketball, which is starting soon. You got both college and pro. You've got NHL starting. You've got all these college football games. You got 6 you can get to. One of the best ways you can get into the door is through Gametime. Now, Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, there's other things that make Gametime absolutely phenomenal. I love their super deal. They've got all kinds of curated deals that'll help you go through the whole process, as well as all-in pricing and views from your seat. Remember, with all-in pricing, toggle that feature so you can see exactly what you're going to be paying up front, so you aren't surprised at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. The fact that even right now, but in the ad read, I'm starting to be able to have inflection again is a good sign, because I've been talking for the last 40 minutes now. Still, obviously, get to the bottoms, and it's more comfortable for me to talk monotone and like this. But we're getting to the point where I can actually use my actual voice, which is very encouraging. This is probably the best I've sounded in the last week and a half. Anyway, what does Illinois do offensively? Let's get to the ranks first. And scoring offense, it's 49th in the country, 31 points per game average. Rushing offense, it's 87th. They're not really running on you a ton. Michigan shuts down the run anyway, generally. 139.5 yards per game. Passing offense is their bread and butter. It's not anything eye-popping. 58th in the country, 242 and a half yards per game. Total offense is 76. They average 382 yards per game. So that is where they're at as far as that's concerned. I do want to look up real quick. Turnover margin, they are 25th in the country. So they have gained defensively, because we talked about that. They've gained 10, and they've only turned the ball over 6 times. I'm trying not to cough. 6 times. Considering where they were last year, that's a big improvement by their offense. Because last year, their offense was, because they were 122nd. They were -8, turned the ball over 23 times last year offensively. So that shows you how much better that they have been at Luke Holtmeyer. So you hope you can bait him a little bit. I am kind of curious to see, real quick, some of the teams they face where they rank defensively. So we'll look at that real quick, just to see here. Can't look up Eastern Illinois. Not that we really want to. But Kansas is 69th. So middle of the pack, literally. Central Michigan, who kind of cares? Nebraska, Penn State, Purdue. So obviously Penn State's got the number 8th defense in the country. Nebraska's 13th. So they've played some decent defenses. And those were kind of their obviously tougher games. Not that Michigan's like doing anything crazy right now defensively. Michigan doesn't have one of the top defenses. It's 44th in the country. So this isn't the same Michigan defense that we've seen, but nonetheless. But what I want to get to here, passing offense. They have the 58th ranked passing offense, average 242 and a half yards per game. Like I said, 58th. Keep that in mind. That makes them the second worst passing offense that Michigan will have seen all year. Michigan is faced through week 7, number 11 Texas. This is passing offense ranks. Number 11 Texas, number 17 Washington, number 26 USC, number 32 Fresno State, number 56 Arkansas State. So they're after Arkansas State. And then you have number 88 Minnesota. So theoretically, Michigan is kind of primed to face an offense like this, assuming that they can take advantage. And that's making some assumptions, of course. So Luke Holtmeyer has been very good so far, completing 68% of his passes, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception. So that's much better than what he had been. We don't know if Caden Fagan is going to be able to play or not. He was out last week. He's their leading rusher, but Josh McCray, he's been a name who's been around forever now at this point, is their other guy. So they've got a little balance. They're all pretty good, but Fagan's the guy that's been absolutely a monster. As far as receiving, Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, 2 senior wide receivers, those are the 2 that you really have to slow down. Their tight end, Tanner Arkin, isn't that much of a threat. So that's good. They don't really use the tight ends. That's kind of what's burned Michigan a little bit this year. But really, it's Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin that have been bigger problems. As far as what they've done on a per game basis, they've been mostly balanced, but against Penn State, they couldn't run the ball and they lost. So they only had 34 rushing yards, 185 passing yards, and they only had, it's a total of 219 yards. That's what Michigan needs to do. That's what they need to do. Now, they did run on a pretty good Nebraska defense. 166 rushing yards, 215 passing yards. And they still went to overtime. So Michigan needs to have something a little bit closer to the Penn State game. But otherwise, they ran the ball over Eastern Illinois. They struggled to run against Kansas. They ran okay against Central Michigan. They ran all over Nebraska. Couldn't run against Penn State. Ran really well and threw the ball really well against Purdue. best passing performance came against Purdue. Otherwise, they tend to be more around the 200 mark. So it is a team that is not like, you don't look at their numbers and say like, yeah, that's really going to beat you. But you can't really look at the Washington numbers that Michigan just had and say, yeah, that's an offense that's going to beat you. You've just got to be able to limit those big plays, keep them out of the end zone, and play complementary football. And Michigan then would be in a pretty good place. So one of the things that I've been advocating for from Michigan for a while, I kind of wonder if we're going to get it. Yeah, because one of the things Tony Alford said today made me kind of perk up a little bit when I read the transcript. Because no, I didn't go to the press conference today. I wonder why. But nonetheless, let's get to that and what I'm really hoping we're going to see a little bit more of come Saturday in Champaign. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so there's something that I really want to see from Michigan that we have not really seen a lot of. I think we covered this a little bit yesterday. Every day's a fog, so I don't know. But Donovan Edwards has 9 receptions for 46 yards so far in the halfway point of the season. Now, granted, Michigan played 15 games last year, 14 each of the last 2. 9 receptions, 46 yards. Remember those numbers. He had 30 last year for 249. So not even halfway there. The year before he had double, 18 for 200. And he was out for multiple games. So he only played 11. And they kind of had to shut down the passing because he had a cast on his hand. In 2021, he had just over double, 265 yards. Obviously, 170 of those came in one game. They absolutely need to start utilizing Donovan Edwards in the pass game. Absolutely. The fact that it hasn't really happened much, 9 receptions for 46 yards, it's just like they get him in the screen game. Like they're not really passing at him downfield. Like, get it to him in the flat, get it to him in the seam, get him in a slant, whatever. Just, you got to get him in a one-on-one against a linebacker or a safety. That's where he's going to make, that's his bread and butter. That's what he does well. The good news is just, I'm going to read you a quote from Tony Alford today. And that gave me some hope and some confidence because he was asked about like the difference in skill sets between Donovan Edwards and Kalel Mullings. So they know, like, listen, they know. So he says this. I think Donovan is more of a guy that you can put out in space and do some things as far as running routes. I think some of the more rugged, tougher yard stuff, probably more attributed to the things that Kalel might be more suited for in certain situations. But the whole objective, again, get a little bit of the cough drop juice in here, is to make sure that we're trying to develop guys that are 3-down players that can play every single down. And again, some guys are a little bit more better at this or that than others. The key, again, is put the best 11 guys on the field for that particular situation. They do have a little bit different skill sets. Both of them are high-end skill set guys. Both of them do have different skill sets, obviously. I understand that you're going to look at it with the idea of Kalel is going to be more of your typical 3-down back because, you know, he can run, and he's shown some proclivity to catch it out of the backfield. But, man, they really, 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 really need to get the ball in Donovan's hands. The fact that they recognize, yeah, he can run routes and stuff like that. Okay. Still have Kalel in the backfield. Put Donovan in the slot. Put Donovan out wide. They absolutely need to do what we've seen other teams do, which is like, hey, we got a guy that, you know, can do these certain things and you can't stop it. Penn State with Tyler Warren obviously was a big one. I mean, heck, Michigan with Donovan Edwards in 2021 against Maryland. You just see it all the time. Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State. Just throw it up. You know, they're going to, like, hey, we need to make a play. We're going to throw it to Jeremiah Smith. He's a freshman. They do it. Michigan absolutely needs to find those bread and butter guys. And if that means going to Colston Loveland 18 times in a game, do that. If you need someone to take some of the pressure off of Colston Loveland and none of the other receivers are stepping up, get it to Donovan Edwards because we've seen him do it. We've seen him get open. We've seen him exploit defenses. If he's so good in space and can run routes, then get it to him in space and have him run routes. It's simple. Just do that. The fact that Michigan just like does not do that and has not done that to this point is criminal. I don't know if they're trying to save it for, they're like, hey, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it against Oregon and Ohio State. You don't have that luxury, my guys. You're going to have to find some other things to do. The good news is if you do use it now, teams have to defend it, and that opens up other things. It's just amazing to me the things that they haven't been able to do that we've seen them do before that work. Even jet sweeps and things, we've seen them use some of that. Not nearly as much. But like it just feels like there are other options that they've had that they just haven't used. They can take the pressure off of the quarterback situation that they have. And having a running back that can catch the ball, I think, is one of the big things that they need to be utilizing a heck of a lot more. And it's amazing to me that they haven't. So this is kind of like part of the, like, what does Michigan do well and what doesn't it do well? I don't know what it does do well. There are some areas that you can kind of look at and say, they've got a really good defensive line. Now you're starting to hear like, yeah, might be 3 first-round picks on that defensive line. All right, well, great. They've got to get more pressure. They've got to do more, unfortunately, because what's behind them has not kept up their end of the bargain. They've got to find ways to do more. And they've got to find ways to do better in pass defense, which is in part of the pass rush. Pass rush has got to get home. And then on the other side, you've got to find a way to get the passing game going. So why not utilize what you have at your disposal? You hope that they took this bye week and sit and look at it and say, we have an identity to build because we haven't really established an identity. Here's the few things that we know we could do well. Here's the things that we have left on the table so far that we think we can maybe do well. Just get good at the bread and butter. Because I think that's one of the things that's missing from this team in a lot of ways is like, you look at a lot of other teams and you just say like, well, that team does that well. You're not going to stop it. That had been Michigan with the run game. And then they kind of get away from it. I understand why. They find themselves in holes and they have to. Or they just find themselves in 3rd and long. But they need to find ways to be able to pass the ball. They need to find ways to run the ball more frequently. And when teams really go to shore up the, hey, we're going to stop the run. Okay, we need to hit you over the top with it. They need to be able to make teams pay for their mistakes. They will tell you up and down, left and right, that they can do all these things. Well, now it's time to see it because you are in a part of the season where it is danger zone. You lose to Illinois, your season is over. For playing for nothing but pride at that point. Because you ain't playing for anything other than essentially, can you get to the Citrus Bowl some way, somehow? But chances are, you probably aren't, right? Like if you lose on Saturday, you're probably at best 7-5. If you find a way to win on Saturday, who knows? You could be 10-2. Could be. I wouldn't count on it, like I said at the top of the show. But you have that possibility because everything's open for you. I know you take things game by game. It's not an overarching, like looking at the season. It's our job to look at it. That's what we're doing. But understand, like, you got to win this game. In order to win this game, pull out those stops. To pull out those stops, use what you have at your disposal to make those things work for you. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back hopefully on Thursday. That's the hope. That's the goal. All right, we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace.